2023 has been fantastic for indie games with a number of standout hits, but where the second half of the year looks awesome as well, but as always, release dates are subject to change, and I've included titles with the vague 2023 release window. So let's begin with Hammerwatch II, the sequel to an excellent dungeon crawling title set in a fantasy world. It is very classically Dungeons & Dragons in the hero classes, types of enemies that you will encounter, and the general medieval fantasy setting, but where this developer has excellent pedigree, with both the original and its spin-off Heroes of Hammerwatch being excellent games. The pixel art in this is gorgeous, with what looks to be a compelling gameplay loop, where this releases in less than a month, so look forward to this. The long-in-development Gestalt, Steam and Cinder is also worth a mention, mainly because by putting it here, I'm manifesting that it will release later this year, since this game has been delayed time and again. This steampunk pixel art Metroidvania title sees you exploring the depths of the city, battling against the forces of the corrupt overseers, where based on what they have shown, does have XP, leveling and stats systems, making it more akin to Symphony of the Night. The pixel art is gorgeous, seen in character portraits, environmental backgrounds, and even the player and enemy models, where I'm a sucker for this type of game, so here's hoping that it releases, where apparently the completionist Gerard, as well as YouTubers and streamers Dodger and Jesse Cox, are helping to get this out the door, so I think that this increases their odds of release. A fascinating looking tactical RPG is the Lamplighters League, primarily because of its pedigree and developer, but also because of its setting and theme, giving off Indiana Jones vibes, but where you control a team from the eponymous league, having to chase after an evil cult known as the Banished Court to the far corners of the world. The characters here all have different special abilities, where coordinating the attack and planning carefully will lead you to success, where the description talks about recruiting new characters as well as a stress and injury system, so there seems to be Darkest Dungeon DNA in this as well. If you didn't catch it, this is from the developers of the modern Shadowrun games, which are excellent, making this one of interest. A title on the list, both due to its pixel art and gameplay, is The Siege and the Sandfox, another long-in-development title which saw somewhat of a revival recently, announcing a new publisher, where this game is a self-described Stealthvania title which immediately got my attention. As mentioned a couple of videos ago, stealth games are not common at all, much less one with an interconnected world and gorgeous pixel art, so this game is definitely unique, where I'm interested in the progression and overall structure, since hiding, running and using implements like smoke bombs and avoiding combat seems to be key, flipping the idea of a Metroidvania on its head. A newly revealed title that immediately shot up my wishlist is Station to Station, a voxel minimalist strategy building title where it is all about connecting one train station to the next. You have different ways of running the railway tracks, where connecting stations does actually allow for trade and transport of goods, which in turn allows towns and cities to prosper and grow, which you will see happening, but this simply looks pleasant and relaxing. One of the standout titles from the Steam Next Festival and Summer Game Fest is Wizard with a Gun, a game with a self-explanatory title where you play as such a magic user attempting to survive in the magical wilderness. This self-describes as a co-op survival sandbox, so think Don't Starve, but where you have to collect resources and craft upgrades and equipment, having a home base to expand and upgrade as well, all to gear you up in order to tackle the next challenge. I did impress in its demo showing and should be fun, where it's a Devolver published title, so I have no fears on the quality of this game. One thing that I love about indie games is that they are able to fill gaps in the market from established publishers and IP after these companies deem projects commercially unviable to make, and that is exactly what Bomb Rush Cyberfunk is doing. A Jet Set Radio-like, if that makes any sense, one with a focus on traversal and tricks as you explore the city of New Amsterdam and fight off the military police, having a fantastic look as well. One of the games that went absolutely viral and made the developers a lot of money before even releasing is Mika and the Witch's Mountain, a cozy open-world exploration title where you play as a witch, delivering various packages to the residents of a small island. This title raised over 1.3 million euros on Kickstarter, which is an astounding amount, and rightfully so since it knocks it out of the park in terms of the cozy vibes and art style. Often being compared to the Studio Ghibli classic Kiki's Delivery Service, and since Studio Ghibli does not make games, it does make sense that indie developers try to make something that evokes those movies. Apologies for the whiplash, but this title is inspired by a very different kind of Japanese legend, since World of Horror is a horror roguelite RPG that draws upon horror manga artist Junji Ito, where the 1-bit black and white pixel art does mimic the black and white look of those famous manga panels. It is set in a small town where the end of the world is nigh, resulting in some of the most horrifying monsters emerging from the dark. It will be launching out of early access in Spooky Month, where from what I played of this in early access, it is pretty tough and requires some time to figure out what to do, but the disturbing scenarios and enemies will be for horror fans. Sandwalkers is a pixel art roguelite RPG that looks awesome, coming to us from the developers of Legend of Keepers, where this game mechanically appears to be very similar with the turn-based combat, but different enough without the dungeon keeper aspect, where the pedigree alone makes this one of interest. Speaking of pedigrees, the next title from the behemoth is Alien Hominid Invasion, a reimagination of one of their earliest games named Alien Hominid, which released in 2002, being a run-and-gun action platformer that just looks like chaos. You're invading Earth with up to 3 other friends, battling the humans as you make your way through the city. Interestingly, the levels are procedurally generated, and you're free to take your own path through, so it is roguelite-ish in nature due to the non-linearity. In typical behemoth style, you can clearly see that this game is made by them, since this looks visually similar to Castle Crashers and more importantly, Battle Block Theatre, where this simply looks like fun with friends. One of the more recent reviews that immediately turned heads is Europa, a beautiful looking 3D exploration title where you explore the ruins of a fallen utopia in order to uncover its secrets. I don't believe there's combat in this, so I'm interested to see how the developer will manage to hook our attention, where the wondrous landscapes look absolutely gorgeous and is a world that I would love to get lost in. Gliding and flying looks carefree, but they mention uncovering the story of the last human alive, presumably our main character, so it looks like another relaxing title. It will be no surprise that Devolver's slate of games features heavily on this list, where the awesome looking Gunbrella gets a spot, where you're looking at a recently released trailer, which might indicate that the release is close. You get a more in-depth look at the gameplay here, where the eponymous Gunbrella is your primary weapon, serving as a gun, a shield since it is bulletproof, a melee weapon where you can dash into enemies, and a traversal mechanic that allows you to dash in the air, as well as to hover and glide for more air control, where you will be able to upgrade and tweak the weapon as well. I believe the protagonist is searching for answers on who killed their wife, where it's a world with giant robots, monsters, and a sinister inquisition, coming to us from the developer of Gato Roboto and looks excellent. I was so very happy to see Mineko's Night Market appear in a recent showcase, where this is one of my most anticipated games, having been announced and delayed from 1 year to the next, where surprisingly, over the past 3 years or more, this game and concept have largely been unchanged from its initial reveal. You play as a little kid who arrived at a new home on an island where mysterious men in black types have shown up and you need to figure out why. Oh, did I forget to mention the cats? That appears to be the main draw, but the cats just look so adorable in this, where there's even a large deity-like sun cat named Abe who will be central to the game, not to forget the life sim aspects of being able to sell stuff and play mini-games at the night market, looking very cozy as well. Of course, the Contra-like pixel art run-and-gun platformer Iron Meat gets on the list since it is exactly the throwback action that I love, but this got a feature during my Summer Games showcase and deserves a spot on the list. It is set in an apocalyptic future where the world has been overrun by the Meat, a ravenous mass of muscle and tissue that mutates everything in its path, where you are fighting your way through, and in a very throwback kind of way, it will lead you to the moon, where you will uncover the truth behind the horrifying experiments conducted on it. The action looks awesome, and definitely has Metal Slug DNA as well, and will be out in October. The top 10 titles are games in my favourite genres, with a couple possibly being Indie Game of the Year contenders, so let's kick things off with Creature Keeper, a pixel art action-adventure monster taming title which combines the fun of taming and having monsters fight alongside with you like in Pokemon with the real-time action of a 2D Zelda game. I've long had my eye on this game from way back in 2018 when it was still named Project Elysis, where I love my monster taming titles and the whole bestiary aspect, as well as feeding and taming these creatures appeals to me, not to mention additional systems like a pocket garden where you can grow plants, as well as cooking and crafting, so fingers crossed it releases later this year. Speaking of monster tamers, of course Moonstone Island has to get a mention, a cozy farm sim crossed with monster taming, dungeon crawling and deck building combat, where you play as an alchemist in training, spending a year away from home in a series of islands floating in the sky. You need to complete your alchemy training through venturing out to explore and research, aided of course by your monster companions, even having a home base to upgrade as well as grow various crops. In a Stardew Valley-like fashion, there are townspeople to get to know and fall in love with, so this looks like the complete package. Alright, here we go with the Metroidvanias, where the first half of the year has not been kind to this genre, so let's hope things turn around, where games like Tevi should certainly help. This is the next title from the developer of Rebi Ribi, a similar anime title where combat is a lot more frantic with the addition of almost bullet hell style elements. The pixel art in this is gorgeous, as is the combat with a pretty in-depth combo system, where a little bird told me that this will be releasing in Q3, which means that we will get a release date at any moment, so be sure to keep an eye on this. Another Devolver Digital published title is Pepper Grinder, one with a unique drilling and digging mechanic used in combat, exploration and even puzzle solving. I like the look of this game, where the handcrafted levels and collectible gems emphasizes the collectathon aspect, with interesting looking bosses and environments as well. You are on a quest to reclaim your stolen treasure, but what begins as a simple quest for revenge quickly takes a darker turn with mysterious beings emerging from the shadows, and should be an excellent title as well. Similarly, Nine Souls looks like an awesome 2D action platformer coming to us from Taiwanese developer Red Candle Games, who are best known for two horror titles, Detention and Devotion, so this is quite the departure, but the people have spoken through their crowdfunding campaign, which has been very successful. They stopped short of calling this a Metroidvania, but do mention a Sekiro-like parry system that you need to master, but this has a Q4 release window, so I hope, for its sake, that it releases in October, or at the latest, early November.
Welcome to the land of Mojo.
Another title that immediately captured the imaginations of many is The Plucky Squire, an action-adventure game that sure looks to be inspired by 2D Zelda games, but with a twist, since it also has 3D platforming elements, having similar concepts to Mario Odyssey but is from an indie team. I think that this game looks awesome, both in the 2D art and cute 3D environments, where our hero is on a quest to save his friends from the villain, so it's a fairly vanilla story, but just looks like a solid entry all around. I was so very happy when The Last Faith reared its head again, since this pixel art, grimdark gothic Metroidvania is honestly one of my most anticipated titles, where I've said it many times before, it is essentially what modern Castlevania would be if they continued on in the pixel art direction. Based on the story setup and its Kickstarter pitch, the story seems to be very similar to Bloodborne, set in a fallen city where a mysterious illness has turned the inhabitants into monsters, where our amnesiac protagonist wanders the streets in search of answers. This game does have brutal combat and executions, where it sure feels like the more classic gothic horror version of another pixel art instant classic, Blasphemous, where for now, we only have the release month of October. Speaking of Blasphemous, we have a confirmed release date for Blasphemous II as well, which is very soon, where the Penitent One returns in his never-ending battle with the Miracle. This is a direct continuation of the story from the first game, where our hero reawakens in a foreign land and is once again thrust into the endless cycle of life, death, and resurrection, where the Catholic faith-inspired themes like penance, as well as religious imagery in environments and enemies is excellently done. Based on some early previews, the game does have weapon variety, which results in different builds, Dark Souls style being very different from the original, where it does borrow a page from the Souls games as well in terms of the cryptic storytelling, so expect multi-hour long lore videos for this game as well. It will be no surprise that Sea of Stars gets a high spot on the list, since I have a soft spot for both pixel art games as well as turn-based JRPGs, having grown up with the classics like Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, but this game is certainly paying tribute to the latter. The twin protagonists are children of the Solstice, one powered by the sun and the other the moon, having to combine their power to use eclipse magic to fight back against the forces of the evil Fleshmancer. Like Chained Echoes from last year, a pixel art JRPG could easily be in the top 5 indie games of the year, not to mention that this is from the developer of The Messenger, but this game is actually set in the same universe and looks to be a mega success as well. The sequel to Game of the Year 2020, Hades 2, is supposed to release in early access in 2023, according to an interview with Supergiant, so I'm putting it on the list, where the godlike roguelite returns and you play as the sister of Zagreus, now hunting down a titan in Kronos, where Supergiant has proven time and again that their games are awesome, and watch this video for the best of the year so far.
Your family awaits you.